What a good week for wide receivers, and maybe even a better week for us, because we nailed our top 3 picks this last week for wide receivers. I know I had Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen seems to be making his case as a top 5 wide receiver this year, being just the absolute go-to guy in Carolina. I called him. He ended with 28.5 points. Nathan, you had Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is old reliable. It's nice to see him back. He also had 20-plus points this last week against that Arizona defense. Nice seeing him getting going. Dalton, who did you have? Michael Pittman?
Yeah, I had Michael Pittman. He scored just sub 20 fantasy points at 19.9. I had spoke about how Gardner Minshew was going to come in and still supply and be able to give him those top numbers like he did this past week. So pretty stoked about that.
Just bangs all around. Bangs all around. I love it for us. I didn't win this week in fantasy. Nathan got the better end of me, but it happens. It happens sometimes. Whatever. We're on to week 7. Nathan, I still have the better record, so just remember that. Anyways, so the way we're going to do this episode, we're going to go break down every single matchup for these wide receivers, tell you whether they're a high risk, low risk, or medium risk for us in these week 7 matchups. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Thursday Night Football. Dalton, you have this game. It is currently the Jacksonville Jaguars at New Orleans facing the Saints.
Yeah, so right now I currently have the Saints ranked number 6 in yards allowed and number 2 in completion percentage. So with that being said, the Jags have a very talented quarterback and a wide receiver group, but I'm expecting them to struggle quite a bit versus this stingy Saints defense. So I believe it's very possible for one or the other to have a decent performance in this game, whether that is Christian Kirk or Calvin Ridley. But at the end of the day, I think the reason they may have a good performance is because of the fact that this could be a shootout performance between the two teams, and so I can see either one of them having a decent performance. But the reason I had them in a medium risk is because of the fact that this is such a good defense from the Saints. So this is like I said, it could go one or the other. I don't know which one, because Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley both kind of offer that wide receiver 1 status. It just depends who gets it that week. And so with this being such a good defense, it's kind of hard to tell. So either way, I think they're going to, whether one is wide receiver 1 this week or wide receiver 2, I don't think there's much of a difference in between. I don't think one's going to be a total bust. So I think you could be safe going with either one as your wide receiver 2 if you have them on your team. Now, for Jacks, on the other hand, I currently have them ranking at 32nd in passing yards allowed and 31st in pass completions allowed. So as we can see, they currently are also 27th. They rank 27th in pass defense versus touchdowns. So they are pretty weak in the red zone as well. So Derek Carr just had the game of his career, basically of his career, but definitely of this season last week versus Houston, passing the rock nearly 50 times for 353 yards, but with only a touchdown, cashing in a top 10 quarterback performance. I believe this could be a breakout performance by Chris Olave this week, as he is clearly Derek Carr's favorite target. His target share, coupled with the struggling passing defense this week versus Jacksonville, bodes well for a massive performance this week. So that's why I currently have Chris Olave as a low risk wide receiver. I also wouldn't be surprised to see Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed benefit as well against the struggling pass defense. But like with Michael Thomas's target share unlike Shaheed's, I think that this offense is going to be able to, with Derek Carr's high passing arm, I think it could still be able to benefit Michael Thomas as well this week. So I have him at a medium risk this week, but I think he could give you some wide receiver 2 numbers. As for Rashid Shaheed, I like his chemistry, but I just don't think he's quite there yet. I think you've being on a team where there's 2 super hungry wide receivers on this team, it's kind of hard to be able to give him the production that he deserves. So that's why I kind of have at a high risk. So we don't know where he's going to land week to week. So, anyways, guys, that's all I have for this matchup. But let's see what we have for Baltimore versus Detroit.
So I think that in this game, we're going to see a lot of passing in this Baltimore versus Detroit. We see here that Baltimore and Detroit have bottom 3 defenses and targets allowed versus them to the wide receiver position, which is why I'm giving all of Zay Flowers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Josh Reynolds as low risk plays this week, someone that should be in your lineup. Zay Flowers, he has proven to be wide receiver one for that offense. We obviously, with him being drafted as a rookie, we weren't quite sure what that was going to look like, but it's safe to say that he is the number one option in that offense with 8+ targets, with next being OBJ at just shy of 4, and then Rashad Bateman at 3. So not a lot of passes going around there, but I do think that against this Detroit Lions defense, with as good as that defensive front is that they have, I don't think that rushing the ball is quite it. We haven't seen that Baltimore rush really get going a whole lot. Gus Edwards has struggled on the ground. Justice Hill has struggled on the ground ever since really J.K. Dobbins has went out. They haven't had a lot of reliability go on that. So I really like Zay Flowers a lot. I think we'll see maybe one of his highest targeted games, highest reception games. He's not really a red zone premium wide receiver here, but maybe it's another game where we start to see him maybe find the end zone too. So I really like him averaging 13.2 fantasy points up to this point in the season. So I think that he's a solid play here. OBJ, I don't necessarily love. I do have him as a medium risk play. He only averages 5. He has an injury bug with him attached there as well. Rashad Bateman, he hasn't proved anything, has averaged less than 4 points for that Baltimore offense. So I think it's safe to say he is on the bench unless you were just bitten by that injury bug and you got to put him in. Maybe a good play, maybe one of the hopeful matchups you have, but I don't love Bateman here. Amon-Ra and Josh Reynolds are playing this Baltimore defense where we see that they do have a top 10 defense against wide receivers and total fantasy points per game. But if we look at the top there at their targets, they do allow the 31st most, so next to last. So I do expect that rock to be thrown around quite a bit there as well. So Amon-Ra has just been Mr. Consistent, averaging 20 points per game in PPR leagues. Josh Reynolds is right behind him at nearly 12 fantasy points per game in PPR leagues. So been very reliable to this point, 6 weeks through the season, and I do expect that to stay in this Jared Goff-led offense. But let's go ahead and go on to the next matchup, which is Atlanta versus Tampa Bay.
Yeah, here we have two teams coming off a loss. It's a divisional game. Uh, they're in each other's division. It's kind of a rivalry. Well, kind of. I'd say the biggest one in that division would be the Buccaneers and Saints. But both teams coming off a loss. You know, the Tampa Bay, they brought out the creamsicle uniforms and they just played a really good Detroit team, and Detroit came down and handled business there in Tampa Bay. And the Falcons are coming off a loss against the Commanders, where Desmond Ridder threw a pick in the end zone. So here we'll start off with Tampa Bay. I'm going to go with Mike Evans here. I really like Mike Evans. To me, that so far this year, it seems to be that that's the kind of guy that Baker Mayfield trusts a lot on the team, and especially in the red zone. This is a guy who he's averaging about 16.12 points per game in fantasy, and he's probably averaging around 8. It's like 8 something targets a game. I really look for them to bounce back this week playing Atlanta. I really see trying to get a couple throws to Mike Evans to get Baker Mayfield back in a rhythm, back on his feet. The other wide receiver there in Tampa Bay, as we all know, is Chris Godwin. I also like Chris Godwin here, but the only thing I don't like about Godwin is he has yet to catch a touchdown on the year, where Mike Evans has 3. So that's why if you're going to start a wide receiver one, I would say Mike Evans would be your guy. And then their third wide receiver then that they have over there is Trey Palmer, and that is a high risk guy. He doesn't get a lot of targets, doesn't get a lot of receptions, but he does have more touchdowns than Chris Godwin does on the year. But you know, it is Chris Godwin. You're not going to start Trey Palmer over Chris Godwin, because Chris Godwin can also be a guy that you like, a low risk guy that you like. Moving into Atlanta, like I said, Ridder threw that pick. Well, I forgot to mention though. I know Atlanta's defense is kind of what helps them keep in the games a little bit. So it could be a close game. Could be a super close game, defensive game. But you're going to have to throw the football and make plays, and that's why I like Mike Evans here, because that's who Baker Mayfield's going to look to, in my opinion. But moving on to it, the Atlanta wide receivers. Oh man, is it a struggle? I I would say they could pretty much all be a high risk, but for this episode alone, we're going to go with my low risk probably be Drake London. It kind of seems like he's getting a little bit more targets and a little bit more action from Ritter. Well, they got Matt Collins and they just traded for Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson's kind of a deep threat guy. He kind of looked to throw the ball down the field to him, but Ritter's kind of struggled with that. So if I have to pick an Atlanta receiver in this matchup, I'm going to go Drake London. We all saw how the London game against Jacksonville that Matt Collins was not quite happy with Desmond Ritter. So yeah, that's going to be my medium risk, my low risk is Drake London, and the high risk will be Van Jefferson. So that's all I have for this matchup. Let's get on to our next one where we have Denver versus Green Bay.
Make sure y'all are checking out our Discord group as well. In that Discord group, you will see our full rankings 1 through 24 for our quarterback, running back, and wide receiver positions. And again, if you remember the first part of this episode, we nailed our top 3. Anyways, let's go ahead and get back into this.
Yeah, so guys, for Green Bay at Denver, guys, this is a game that I'm actually not looking forward to, considering that I am a diehard Denver fan. Wish I wasn't, and DJ is a diehard Green Bay fan. But considering this is something where it's a game that I am not highly uh, advantageous for receivers in. So that being said, Denver currently ranks 31st in passing yards allowed and 32nd in completion percentage and 32nd in yards per attempt. This defense is a dumpster fire of a mess. Now, it sounds like I would be high on Green Bay's wide receivers. Although this is a highly favorable matchup for Green Bay, I'm not liking the quarterback in Jordan Love either. He has been wildly inconsistent this year. I think he's still a growing quarterback. I don't think he's a trash quarterback. I think he's doing just fine as a new quarterback. Um, Something that you would expect. I think he'll be fine later on. But as of right now, I just think that the inconsistency there is kind of hurting where I'm at with these wide receivers. However, coming off a bye week and now facing one of the worst defenses in the league on the passing side of the ball, I'm going to give Jordan Love the benefit of the doubt and hope that he's been able to clean some of that mess up. He's had 5 interceptions in the past 2 weeks, but I think that he could still give a solid outing versus the Broncos, considering that he's coming off that bye week. As for Denver, it doesn't matter who they're playing. The only thing worse than Denver's defense is their offense, led by Russell Wilson. Last week, Wilson passed for an underwhelming 95 yards and 2 interceptions. Unfortunately, the success of these Denver wide receivers in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton really are hinging on the gameplay of Russell Wilson, which varies greatly from week to week. So Green Bay currently ranks second behind the Cleveland Browns in passing yards allowed. And we saw what the Browns did to the 49ers last week. I think that the Green Bay passing defense is a close second behind the Cleveland Browns. So with Russell Wilson's, downfall on top of a top performing passing defense led by Jair Alexander, I'm not expecting any of the Denver wide receivers to be a go this week. You know, considering what's going on with Russell Wilson and the woes that they're seeing on the offensive side of the ball. As for Green Bay, to take a step back, for Christian Watson, I currently have him at a medium risk. He's the only one I'm liking this week. He is coming back, like I said, off of a bye week for Green Bay, I think, and he's only played a handful of, or only 2 or 3 games this season, but I think he's played decently well leading up to the bye week. So I think that this could be someone that I would stash as a wide receiver 2 or 3 on my team. And I think that he's going to play very well, especially on a Broncos defense that is struggling, and they are ranking dead last in almost every facet of their passing defense. So I really like this matchup for Christian Watson. As for Romeo Dubes and Jaden Reed, I'm going to kind of take a step back from this just because of Jordan Love and what's going on. I think he's going to hone in on Christian Watson this week, and that's someone that I'm going to double down on. That's all I have for this game, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys take it away for Las Vegas versus Chicago.
So in this game, it may be somewhat very similar to that Denver versus Green Bay game. I have Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers here as low risk plays, and I think that they've proven their worth in this offense. So I know that Jimmy G right now is kind of a question mark to play. But regardless, I still do not trust the Chicago Bears pass defense against wide receivers. We see right now that they're currently ranked 18th in total PPR points allowed to the wide receiver position. And Devontae Adams has always found a way to get open regardless who is there at the quarterback position. Jacoby Myers has done that as well. And in fact, Jacoby Myers currently has more PPR fantasy points per game than Devontae Adams does. So I mean they're right next to each other. It's 0.1 difference, so it's really not much at all. They're performing very well, and I think that they've done enough again to earn a spot on your starting week. Starting lineup week to week. Hunter Renfrow on the other end, he is a high risk play. There is absolutely no reason he should even be rostered on some of your lineups. He only averages 2 fantasy points per game. And also, I think the biggest thing here is a snap percentage. We see a snap percentage well below 50%. They are not putting him on the field, and when they are not using him at all. High risk play I don't even know if he's on your fantasy lineup, and it's a question mark on how your team is performing if he is on your actual lineup. But looking at the other side of this, the Chicago Bears, the Raiders have a very good pass defense versus wide receivers. So I don't love DJ Moore here. DJ Moore is probably the most explosive player on that Chicago Bears offense, but the Raiders have a good pass defense. So DJ Moore here, I do have as a medium risk play. I do like him. I know that for most fantasy teams, he is your wide receiver one. So I understand having to start him, but just know that it is a medium risk. Last week, we saw him play against the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings have a bottom 3 defense versus wide receivers, and he only was able to muster 10 points. And I think it's a little bit of that Russell Wilson effect that Dalton was talking about in that Denver game, where his production really hinges on Justin Fields' value week to week. And I don't know how much he's going to have versus this Las Vegas Raiders team. And for that same reason, I don't love Darnell Mooney at all. I think he's a high risk play here. He only averages 5 fantasy points per game. So with this being a tough matchup versus the Las Vegas Raiders, I think we just go ahead and we leave him out of our lineups this week as well. But let's go ahead and let's move on to the next matchup, and that is Cleveland versus the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. So here I got I'm gonna start with Indianapolis here, but like Dalton had mentioned in the beginning of the episode, Minshew really likes Michael Pittman Jr. And so I really see that, if you have Michael Pittman Jr. must start. He is my low risk guy that I think that's going to get a lot of targets with Minshew back there, because Minshew is a backup quarterback, and they look for people who can be safety nets for him, and I believe that is Michael Pittman Jr. for Minshew. The Browns defense is a very, very, very good defense. So you also need to keep that in mind too, if you're talking about wanting to start any Colts wide receivers. We just saw what they did against the 49ers, and you cannot sit here and say like, oh, that was a fluke game, because we saw what the 49ers did to the Dallas Cowboys, and people said that the Cowboys had a top 3 defense in the NFL. So the Browns played tremendous football. Their defense is top tier in the league. So with that being said, another thing to mention is that, yes, that is a safe net for Minshew, and Dalton's predictions have been good with Pittman Jr. But another thing to know is that the Browns defense are first in every category in passing defense. The targets, receiving yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points per game. That defense is no joke. They come out, they're ready to play, they're shutting you down, and they're a scary defense. And the other 2 wide receivers we have there are Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. With a backup quarterback, I could see, they could possibly be up for a decent game, just because I think Pittman's going to get a lot of attention. But again, playing the Browns, so they can, I would have them medium risk, maybe even going into high risk, just how good that Browns defense is. But moving on from the Colts, I'm going to go into the Browns here a little bit. Still don't know about if Deshaun Watson's going to play. It seems like every time we come into a week, they're like, Watson's going to play, and then we get a day or 2 days before the game, and they're like, we're going to sit him out. We're going to start somebody else. But here, We have Amari Cooper. I like Amari Cooper here just because if Watson doesn't play, you need to have that safety net. And um, he's the number one guy there in Cleveland. They also have Elijah Moore and Donovan People-Jones. So my low risk is going to be Amari Cooper. You know, he's done fairly well for having backup quarterbacks for the past 2 games. And with Elijah Moore, he had a few drops. They missed him a couple times. He's going to be my medium risk, and then Donovan People-Jones, he's a high risk. So that's what I have for this matchup. Not really much going into it. I think the Browns defense is going to control this game, and with the offense, it just really depends on who's playing quarterback. But I do like Amari Cooper here. So with that being said, let's move on to the next game, and we have Buffalo versus New England.
Yeah, so guys, looking at this game here for the Buffalo Bills at the New England Patriots, minus the Jets, the Bills have been playing some great football on both sides of the ball. Josh Allen is starting to look like his midseason self, averaging nearly 300 passing yards in each of his contests this season. So I'm really liking where this offense is headed. I think they're going to be definitely in the contingency for a AFC championship. And that a lot of that's led by their wide receiving core. I think they have some of the best wide receivers in the league, especially in the AFC. A pretty healthy core. So. And that's all led by Stephon Diggs. As you can see here, I have him as a low risk, and that's going to be pretty much every week. If you have Stephon Diggs on your team, he's probably the best player on your team, and he should be starting on your lineup. Forbearing any injuries every single week. So he's averaging 12 to 13 targets every week and over 100 plus yards per game. So I'm really liking. Doesn't matter who he's playing, who he's going up against. This is someone who needs to be absolutely be starting for your team. The next person I like looking at the Bills is Gabe Davis. I think he's a solid play. He has a wide receiver 2. He is a wide receiver 2, but he has wide receiver 1 appeal. So the last week wasn't his best week, but we have seen flashes of 100-yard games. He has the ability to score. He has a knack for the red zone and getting into the end zone. So I like that with Gabe Davis. That's why I have him at a medium risk, because he does have that touchdown appeal. As for the Patriots, though, Mac Jones hasn't scored more than 7 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. Granted, they were against tough defenses, but come on, man. Like, what's going on there in New England? So this kind of goes back to the Russell Wilson thing and what we've said before. The wide receivers kind of being hindered by bad or poor quarterback play. So also with Juju, I have him currently too as a high risk wide receiver right now. A lot of that also has to do with injury, concussion. So I would be paying close attention to that. But when he is healthy, he hasn't been much of a benefactor for the Patriots either, though. So he's only been averaging 3 receptions and 20 yards per game, and that can also be said for Devontae Parker. He's also averaged 2 to 3 receptions when on the field and 20 to 30 yards per game. So I'm not really liking the production from these two. It seems like the only one that's giving any type of life to this wide receiver core here for the Patriots is Kendrick Bourne. He's the only one I had that has a medium risk. He had a great week last week, I believe, coming off versus the Raiders, going for 89 yards. He had 11 targets and had 10 receptions. So I love that. It seems like when Mac Jones is going to have a bad week, at least someone can have a good one. So I think he's going to definitely be targeting and looking for Kendrick Bourne. It seems to be his only safety blanket on the field. However, this Bills defense ranks near top 10 in every category versus wide receiver, as we can see. And with that being said, I think a lot of that also comes and stems from the D line. So I'm going to be expecting them getting after Mac Jones quite a bit this week. So, like with that being said, I'm not going to. That's why I have Juju and Devontae Parker both being very high risk for this game, with Kendrick Bourne being more the medium risk, considering the fact that I think he's going to be looked for often and be in the game script a little more for Mac Jones. So that's all I have currently for this game. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Pittsburgh at the Los Angeles Rams.
For this game, man, it's exciting again. I know we keep talking about Cooper Kupp, but football is just different when Cooper Kupp is strapped in, ready to go. So with that said, I do have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua as must-start, low-risk fantasy plays this week. We saw Puka didn't have the best week last week, but I think that's going to be very different in this upcoming week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, where we see they struggle to stop wide receivers. Currently, they are a bottom 3 defense in stopping wide receivers with the 29th overall pass defense versus that position. So I think Cooper Kupp and Puka, both who average well over 20 points. Well, not really well over, but 20 plus points per game in PPR leagues. They are continuing to be must starts week to week. But then on the other hand, I do have Tutu Atwell as a medium risk. He is still getting very good usage, even with Cooper Kupp back. We still see that he's averaging roughly 7 targets a game, over 50 receiving yards, and this is honestly the Rams. They may be the only team, I believe, who has 3 wide receivers who average 10 plus fantasy points per game between Cooper, Puka, and Tutu Atwell. So I don't think that all 3 of them are necessarily start worthy, but I do think that Tutu does bring some really good flex appeal into this matchup versus Pittsburgh, who has struggled again to stop wide receivers. So I do like all of them here in this matchup. But then on the flip side, we see the Pittsburgh wide receivers. I think that the best that we see here is George Pickens at a medium risk. And I mean, George Pickens, he's a consistent player. He is a good player, a good hands catcher for that team. So I think it just really falls on Kenny Pickett more so than anything. But that Los Angeles Rams pass defense is very good. They have allowed only 1 receiving touchdown to wide receivers this year, which is tied for first. And then fantasy points per game, they are 4th. And again, that's mostly because they haven't allowed a ton of touchdowns to that position. So George Pickens here, don't love, but don't hate. So I do give him that medium risk. He is averaging 15 fantasy points per game, which is good, but he may be on the lower end of that this week. Allen Robinson, not a fan of. I think that he is someone that sits on your bench. I do think that he should be rostered in leagues, but especially with Deontay Johnson being out for an extended period of time, having Allen Robinson on your team is a good choice, but not starting him this week versus this Los Angeles Rams defense. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the next matchup, and it's Washington at New York facing the Giants.
Boy, this is rough. I'm gonna start out with the Giants here. Don't start any of their wide receivers. That's just plain and simple. They're all high risk. I mean, it's just plain and simple. It's the most consistent player probably moving on going forward for the rest of the season is going to be Darren Waller. They just really struggle in the wide receiver. I think they're all high risk. So I'm not even going to really talk much about the Giants wide receiving core because everybody who watches football knows what that situation is. But I will say this though, that defense looked damn good against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. They looked really, really good. And in my opinion, the Giants should have won that game. Terrible mistake by Tyrod Taylor at the end of the first half in the red zone, switching to a run. And also, my God, the holding call on Darren Waller on the last play of the game. You could read that man's shoulder pads. And the whole call was that bad. But enough of that. I'm going to go ahead and hit Washington's wide receivers here. Before y'all give me crap in the comments, the guy I like here in this matchup is going to be Curtis Samuel. He is a guy I like here, and he is my low-risk guy I like to have here. And I say that because Curtis Samuel is averaging 5.2 targets per game, and his averaging 4.5 receptions per game. When I was looking at his stats earlier, it was basically almost every time he's targeted, he comes down with the ball. He catches the football. I think there's only been 1 or 2 games where he didn't catch one of his targets and he went 75%. So I really like him. He seems to be really, really reliable for Sam Howell the past couple of weeks. And not to mention that he is averaging 12.6 fantasy points per game. Terry McLaurin, 11.9. That's crazy because you come in and you think Tim McCoy is a wide receiver number one, but it just seems like Sam Howell the past couple of weeks has found his way with Curtis Samuel and seems to have a lot of trust in him and being able to be a playmaker for that offense. And I'm going to move into Terry McLaurin here. I still like Terry McLaurin. Don't get me wrong. I just really like Curtis Samuel because of what I've seen the past couple of weeks out of him. I think Terry McLaurin could be. He's week to week on a high risk, not high risk, low risk, medium risk. Um, I still think he's right there on the verge. I think he's going to have weeks where he pops off. I just don't know how the Giants defense is going to play. If they play anything like they did against Buffalo and they were able to really have Buffalo struggle, I think it could be a long game for the Commanders. And but yeah, McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, I like them. Low risk, really like low risk guys. Probably going to start them if you have them on your lineup, especially with some bye weeks here and there. But moving on, I have Jahan Dotson and wide receiver number 3 here, and that is a high risk. Stay away from Jahan Dotson. We were very high on him at the beginning of the year coming into the season, and it's just kind of been disappointing after seeing what he's done the past several weeks. I'm staying away from him. He's a very high risk player to start in your to have in your lineup. But that's all I have on this matchup. We're going to move on to the next matchup, and we have Arizona versus Seattle.
Yeah, so guys, here I'm actually expecting a decent matchup here for the Cardinals versus the Seahawks. I think Josh Dobbs is getting better. However, I still think he's not fully there yet. He's only completing 50% of his passes on a weekly basis, but I do like how much he's throwing the ball. So he is, you know, north of 35 40 passes per game, which I really like. I would just like those completions to be a little higher, but we do know how things can be for opposing teams coming into Lumen Field here in Seattle. So especially how the 12th man comes into play and that defense. So let's get into the Cardinals here. For Marquise Brown, I currently have him as a medium risk. The last 3 weeks, he's had 10 plus targets, and the yards per game is not bad. So obviously he is a favorite of Josh Dobbs, which I like. So that's why I have him at a medium risk. They're going to get him involved in the game plan. I see that again this week. However, I don't see him having a breakout performance, but I think he'll do you well as your wide receiver 2 this week. As for Michael Wilson and Rondale Moore, these are matchups that I would probably shy away from. I think these are two that are going to definitely struggle as they have only seen a handful of looks this season per game, and they are kind of relied more upon their big play abilities. And we just haven't seen that in Rondale Moore quite yet, but we've seen it a couple of times in Michael Wilson. Despite only having 2 or 3 catches a game, he's had 70 yards in those games. But I don't want to rely too much on their big play abilities this game, especially considering where they're playing. As for the Seahawks, I have DK Metcalf as a low risk in this game. I love his target share. I also love his big play ability to be able to go up and be able to make those contested catches. I think he's someone who's going to be Mr. Reliable for you and help you on a weekly basis. The Cardinals are currently 31st in reception yards allowed, so that's something that I really like here. And they're also 21st in targets allowed. I think that Gino's going to be able to come in and be able to produce fairly well this week. I think he's a very accurate quarterback. Like we said last year, he finished as QB number 5, and I think he's going to get into that mid-form season of himself, just like I've said that Josh Allen is doing. I think Geno Smith can get there again, especially in this Pete Carroll type of offense, and how Kenneth Walker has been helping out in the rush game as well, trying to open up those lanes in the passing game. So I really like this. DK Metcalf is going to do that. For Tyler Lockett, having a medium risk for us. I like his target share. I have him at a medium risk just because I think DK Metcalf is going to take a lot of those targets away. However, Tyler Lockett is still going to be a wide receiver 2 for you as his floor, but he could still finish as a wide receiver 1 this week. He's going to definitely be in the short game involved quite a bit, but DK Metcalf, like I said, is going to probably likely get a lot of those red zone targets and be able to stretch the field a little more and possibly, like I said, have more touchdown opportunities. As for Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think we're just seeing, like we said again, some growing pains here as a rookie wide receiver. I think that he just has 2 very talented wide receivers ahead of him as of now. So as we're shaping up for the middle of the season, Jackson Smith and Jigba is showing some improvement, but I don't think he's quite there yet. So I'm not gonna completely rely on him this week and probably next, but I do like how he's progressing. So anyway, with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and talk about the Los Angeles Chargers going into Arrowhead Stadium.
Yes, this is going to be a very, very, very fun matchup, and it seems to be a pretty good matchup every time that Herbert and Mahomes get to play against each other. Um, with that being said, I'm going to start here with the Chiefs. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Sky Moore. We all know that the Chiefs wide receivers have been struggling trying to find the guy that Patrick Mahomes can lean on other than Travis Kelce. I don't think Sky Moore's it. I'm going to have Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney kind of as high risk starts, but the guy that I really look forward to improving in the Chiefs offense and the Patrick Mahomes I see him leaning more on each week is Rashee Rice. He's averaging about 9.5 fantasy points per game, about 4.7 targets, 3.5 receptions. But I look for that to average to start going up because you got to have somebody else to throw the football to other than Travis Kelce. And we're seeing it week in and week out that Chiefs offense is struggling due to not having another guy to throw the football to like they were so good when they had Kelce and Tyreek Hill. They're trying to find that other guy that they can lean on. And I think that's going to be Rashee Rice. I think he's going to be the guy that the Patrick Mahomes is going to kind of look to start changing things in that offense. But one thing to know going into this matchup is a lot of people said that beginning of the year that the Chargers defense is the reason why they can't win football games or they keep losing football games, whatever. But that Chargers defense did give up 342 yards total to the Dallas Cowboys, and they gave up, I think Dak was north of 270 passing yards against that Chargers defense. But one thing to keep in mind is that this Chargers defense has 21 sacks on the year already. 21 sacks on the year already. So look for them to try to get home on Patrick Mahomes, kind of make him uncomfortable, get him out of the pocket, but he's still pretty good out of the pocket. And that's why I look for the Chargers to blitz and try to get Patrick Mahomes moving around, get him out of the pocket, and that's where he's going to be looking to Travis Kelce and hopefully Rashee Rice, the guy he can lean on a little more. But that's what I have for the Chiefs. Going on into the Chargers. For the Chargers, you got to start Keenan Allen. That's a no brainer, right? Yeah, he's 31 years old, but he's 31 years old and still tearing it up in the NFL. And he wins most of the routes that he runs just because he's just a quarterback savvy wide receiver. He helps your quarterback out, he helps you out, and he just seems to be there and open at the right place at the right time. He's averaging almost 11 targets per game on top of 8.4 receptions. And this man, he is 31 years old and still tearing it up. He's 24.9 fantasy points per game. That's insane. That is insane. This guy is he's still showing us why he's still one of the best in the league, even at his age. And he's got a really good quarterback in Justin Herbert. And, they kind of struggled a bit against Dallas, but look for them to bounce back. They got to come in here. They play the Chargers or they play the Chiefs quite a bit, and they were it's always a big game, a battle game when they come in and play. So that's my low risk guy, Keenan Allen, and I mean that's a no brainer. Then moving on, you got Joshua Palmer. He can be kind of your mid risk guy. I would look into this. He's not as productive as Keenan Allen. He won't get the same amount of targets or the receptions as Keenan Allen would, but he's there as a mid risk, a guy that you could throw in your flex if you have somebody on your bye week, or like DJ has mentioned, if in the past, if you're bitten by the injury bug, it's a guy you can put in there and hopefully get you about 8 points in your flex spot. But wide receiver 3 here, Quentin Johnson, I'd just stay away from. It's the first round draft pick that they got out of him this year. He really is not targeted all that much. I think he's averaging just north of 2.5 targets, maybe at 2.6 targets per game with one reception per game. I think he's averaging, I don't know, 10 yards per game, if that. And he hasn't had a touchdown yet this year either. So it's It has the potential to be a defensive game because I say that because the Chiefs have also, since Chris Jones has been back, have played very, very well, and they have 17 sacks on the year. So both of these defenses seems like they like to get after the quarterback, try to make you uncomfortable. Herbert does have the broken middle finger, so I would like to see a high powered game here with these two quarterbacks coming in. I think it has the potential to be that just because of the quarterbacks we have. But these defenses do like to get out of the quarterback, and the sacks show for it. But that's all I have for this matchup. I'm excited to see what it brings us, and ready to see what we can get. But let's move on to the next matchup we have, and that's Miami versus Philadelphia.
Do you like sports betting? So do we. Are you good at it? Because we are not. But we do have a community, our Discord community, and there we have started to track all of our weekly spreads, and we've betted on every single NFL game spread. And we started this last week in week 6. Nathan finished with the best record, 8-5. Me and Dalton went 6-7, unfortunately. So we definitely ended in the negative. Thank God I didn't take some of these bets. It was just the purpose of it, and we did it. So we would love your advice. Join that community and give us some of your best advice, and maybe we can tell some of your picks. But let's go ahead and get back into this. So this is a Sunday night football game, and Nathan, I think it's actually quite the opposite of what you were just talking about with defenses showing up and showing out. I think this Miami Dolphins and this Philadelphia Eagles offense are just going to have some fun this week. If we look at the over-under that they opened up as the highest this week at 52.5. And honestly, I think that they may hit that by the third quarter. Nothing has stopped this Miami offense from doing anything. They're consistently throwing up 40-plus points a game. And with the way that the Philadelphia Eagles defense is, especially against the pass. So Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I feel like, are low-risk plays. And honestly, I have a low-risk play for every wide receiver listed on this screen just because I think that this is going to be such a high-scoring game. But also, all 4 of these wide receivers on this screen are high-quality wide receivers. The lowest scoring one week to week is Devontae Smith at 12.2 PPR fantasy points per week. So I think all of these are very good plays. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles defense is 28th, so a bottom 5 in the league. The Miami defense is 24th, so bottom 10 in the league. So I think that all of these wide receivers are going to have their fair share of targets, receptions, yards, everything else. And again, there's going to be a lot of touchdowns going around, and maybe each one of these guys on this list scores 1. But some of them are bound to score 2. Tyreek Hill is wide receiver number 1 in all of fantasy football, and he is only going to add more to this list with as bad as this Philadelphia Eagles defense has been against wide receivers. So it'll be a fun Sunday night football game, and I'm excited for this one this week. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the Monday Night Football matchup, which is the San Francisco 49ers versus the Minnesota Vikings. So for this Monday night game, there isn't a wide receiver that I necessarily don't like, just because this San Francisco defense and Minnesota Vikings defense has given up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, Minnesota is a bottom 3 defense to the wide receiver position. So I think one of these San Francisco wide receivers are going to do well. My faith is completely in Brandon Ayuk. I think Brandon Ayuk has proven to be the guy there. Deebo Samuel is still an elite level athlete, but we saw him last week only get 1.1 points. And I know he has a lingering injury that's coming around. And and for that reason as well, I think he's a medium risk play here. I love the matchup if he's deemed available. Then maybe he moves a little bit up into that low risk play, but I'm going to keep him in that medium risk, especially with that injury that he has. But I do love the matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings. Jauan Jennings, I also like as well as a medium risk. I do have him listed as a medium risk, assuming that Deebo Samuel sees something similar to what he saw last week and not getting a lot of snaps because of the said injury. So I think Jauan Jennings will step into that role. And again, with that Minnesota defense, I think it's a very good matchup. But moving to the Minnesota side of the ball, now that Justin Jefferson is out and on IR, bummer for me as his fantasy manager, but it's A-okay, we will survive. But Jordan Addison has assumed those wide receiver 1 roles, and he has been doing it very well. So he currently averages 12.3 fantasy PPR points per week. The San Francisco defense is about middle of the pack. They do allow a lot of targets, and that's mainly because they're ahead in a lot of games. And I think that San Francisco is going to be ahead in this game. Minnesota has not looked well really at any point throughout this entire year, and San Francisco has. So I know that they got their first loss this last week, but I think that they're going to do their fair share of handling the Vikings, meaning that there's going to be a lot of passes to go around already in this Minnesota Vikings offense that passes so much. So Jordan Addison's likely going to see a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, probably find the end zone at some point in time. But then the last one on this list is KJ Osborne. For that same reason, I have him as a medium risk play here. He didn't perform well, scored less than 10 fantasy points this last week with Justin Jefferson being out. So not really sure what happened there. So do have him as a medium risk play, but leaning a little bit more towards that low risk just because I feel like there's going to be a lot of passes going around. But anyways, that is all that we have for this episode. Thank y'all so much for listening, and best of luck in your week 7 matchups. I hope that you found some sort of value in this and our wide receiver talk here. But as I mentioned earlier as well, make sure y'all go check out that Discord. We have got some good betting stuff in there, and we also want to know what your thoughts are. Please hit us up with that because, like I said, we are not the best at betting. We are not proclaimed experts at this at all. We understand we're bad. We're not trying to say we're good. Give us some advice. We need it. We really need it. But on the fantasy side, we do got y'all covered. Thank y'all so much. Please like and subscribe. We are a new channel trying to grow, so every little thing helps us get there. So anyways, thank y'all so much, and we will see y'all next time.